Hello again, everybody. Welcome back. This is going to be a follow-up video to the video I posted about this storage system a couple weeks ago at this point. This is going to be more in-depth into the little fine details of the system, some of its pros, some of its cons, modifications that you can make to it if you want. And if you haven't seen the first video, I would suggest you at least go watch the showcase first and then come back here. But I would definitely suggest watching this video before making the storage system in your own world. So without further ado, let's get into it. Oh my gosh, I am bad with the camera controls here. The very first thing that I want to show, I've made quite a few modifications. This is the original design over here, and this is the design with a whole bunch of modifications and customizations made to it, and I'll show how all of those work. The most important one, if you take anything away from this video, it is this down here. So the original system, this was a powered rail like this. You want to replace that with a detector rail. This is a bug fix for a common issue that a lot of people were having with the system. I'll get into what the issue was in a little bit, but for now, just make sure that you build this into your system. So you put a detector rail here, a redstone torch with a block, another torch, and then there used to be a hopper here. So this is what the system used to look like. You're gonna replace these hoppers like this, and then you're gonna grab a double chest just like this. So this will stop a flaw with the system that was sometimes a lot of minecarts would be coming along this track right here. A whole bunch of hopper minecarts would come along here, and then they would clog up this hopper right here. So this is the hopper that points into the dropper elevator that sends all of the minecarts back up into the system. And if this hopper gets completely full and gets backed up with items for too long, then this hopper that pulls minecarts out of the newly dispensed minecarts so that there's only 4 in it, sometimes this will get completely backed up and it won't be able to pull a minecart out. So then you'll have minecarts full of 5 blocker items running into the system, and that's not a good thing. So doing this will make it so that none of your minecarts will ever have 5 blocker items in them. So luckily it's a super easy fix, but yeah, make sure that if you've already built this system, you add this to your system. Another thing that I should mention with the minecart system is this. So you can see right here that I have much expanded the hopper minecart storage. This is definitely overkill for a farm or for a system this size. You do not need this much storage at all. But if you're making one that's absolutely massive, you probably will have to expand the minecart storage at some point. And it's super easy to expand it. The original system just has this slab right here. All you have to do as you're adding more droppers to the top, you just keep bridging up with slabs. And then bring it out of the top of the dispensers, or these are droppers, not dispensers. Bring it out of the top of the droppers into the chests here. So that's super simple if you want to add more minecarts to the system. The next feature that I want to show off is this. This orange circuit was suggested by Maxim Fedorcia. I hope I pronounced that correctly in my YouTube comments on the previous video. And it is a little fix that lets the system work with 16 stackable items. The system in the past didn't work with 16 stackable items because it relies on pulling out one of these filter items. So you need to have an available slot in the minecart in order to pull an item out. If the minecart's completely full, it won't be able to pull an item out. And with 16 stackable items, you might remember that the cart is supposed to be picking up 32 or 33 items. And that's more than 16, so it'll grab an entire stack, and then the minecart will be completely full, and it'll go off into the miscellaneous items section. So if you want the system to work with 16 stackable items, all you do is add this little orange circuit right here, which is off of this redstone that used to be a redstone dot, like that. All you do is put a redstone down here, put a repeater on one tick on a block right like this, and then you bring this line all the way down here with a repeater like this. So that's 3 blocks of redstone, or 4 blocks of redstone, including this one, a repeater pointing into this block that's right here, a sticky piston right here, and then a redstone lamp. Or this doesn't have to be a redstone lamp, but you can put a lever here to toggle whether you want the system to work with 16 stackables or regular stacks of items. If it's in the 16 stackable item mode, it will work with regular items also, but it'll be much slower. So I'll explain that in just a second once I'm done showing this off. The last little piece that you need is this staircase of redstone that's pointing into the block that has the powered rail on it. So what this is going to do is make it so that instead of picking up 33 items, the minecart will pick up 15 items. And 15 is one less than 16, so it'll be able to work with 32 stackable items, as you can see in this filter that I have right here. So you will have to change the filters a little bit because 16 stackable items are worth more than 1 stackable items for the comparator. So if you have another 16 stackable item here, pretend that's like a snowball, I might have to get rid of a couple more filter items. So just make sure that when you click on any of these items, you can hear the piston. So if you listen closely, you can hear the piston firing in the background. So that means that this filter is set up correctly. You might have to get rid of some of your non-stackable items and replace them with stacks of regular items or filter items so that you can get the filter right. But that's just the trade-off that you get with the 16 stackable items. So listen to the piston, and it's good. So I should probably now explain what this is. This is a extended part of the storage system. So you can make the storage system round corners and you can expand it in other directions, as I'm showing right here. Something that you should be aware of is that the last block after the first section does need to be soul sand. So the first block of this little bend right here, this needs to be soul sand right here. The one going into the system does not need to be soul sand, but this one does need to be soul sand. Because the minecart will, once the rail gets retracted a little bit, the minecart will keep going and it'll be able to clip a little bit onto this block. And if it's a full block, then it won't be able to fall down onto the rails. So make sure that this is a soul sand. Also make sure that this last block is powered. Same with this block right here. So make sure that the first and last blocks of any section are powered, because if this wasn't powered and then this rail gets retracted, this is all going to get unpowered, and that's bad. That's not good. So you want to make sure that this is powered no matter what. You also want to make sure that the first and last blocks of a section are also waterlogged. That's also going to be important to get the timings right and to make sure that the water can flow back and replace this block when it gets retracted and the water goes away. But the rest of this rail can be whatever you want. Just make sure that the first and last blocks of the system are soul sand with a lever and waterlogged, and then regular with a lever and waterlogged. And make sure that your last section is always going to be a miscellaneous slice, and make sure that there's no miscellaneous slice anywhere else of the system, or else it won't be able to get past the miscellaneous slice. You also will bring out this hopper line and connect it back into this one. You could put composters on top, and that will have everything set up to be working with multiple different slices or different sections working together. So you might have noticed another difference between these two slices, and that is the different chest wall setup. You can use a different chest wall setup if you want. I would still recommend this chest wall. I'm going to talk a lot about the pros and cons of each of these chest walls in just a second here, but this one is each item is its own row, or this is a column. Each item is its own column. In this, each item is its own little group, this 5x5 group. So both of these walls have the same amount of storage, because one con with this is that it has to be 1 block lower if you're doing this type of chest wall. This can be 1 block higher. So these are both 5 double chests for each item, but this can be expanded much further downwards. The biggest con with this is that it's only 1 times hopper speed going into these chests. This system is able to have 2 times hopper speed into this first chest, and then it's going to be able to sort each of these chests at 1 times hopper speed in parallel. So you'll always be sorting 2 times hopper speed into these chests, which is awesome. This is going to be 1 times hopper speed, and that is going to be an issue that I'm going to talk about very soon here. Well, I could talk about that issue right now. We'll get back to this chest wall in just a second. Probably the biggest issue with the sorting system is overflow items. So if I put in, hold on, this was just going to be a demonstration chest of the sorting system working, or these slices working, and you're just gonna have to take my word for it. If I have a whole bunch of one type of item, I'm going to turn off 16 stacks for now because 16 stackable items makes each cart only take half as many items, which makes the sorting system slow down considerably. So I'm going to be turning that off, but you're just going to also have to take my word that this works. So here's a view at this again. 0 ticks, or 1 tick, 1 tick, piston here, pointing into that block with the rail. So these carts are coming along and they're dropping all of their items in there, and eventually, once 5 stacks of blocks are gone, which you'll see right now, should happen pretty quickly, you see it's taking a second for the items to get picked up there. If there's more and more items, eventually they'll start getting backlogged up there, and that's the problem with overflow. So those items are going to sit there on top of that hopper until the hopper, there we go. Those items are just going to sit there in the world until the hopper has space to pick them up. And because the item is, or the sorter is sorting faster than 2 times hopper speed, these items will eventually build up. And if you have the system running for long enough, sending more and more of these items into the system, they will at some point start despawning. And that is a big issue. And that's probably the biggest issue with this system that I can count on, other than like the 16 stackable thing, is this despawning issue. Luckily, the sorter sorts fast enough. It's 2 times hopper speed, which is still incredibly fast, but it can't keep up with the input really. And if you fill this entire input chest completely with 64 stacks of one item, these items will never despawn. So it will be able to pick up these items before they start despawning, which is after 5 minutes of them being on the ground, because 2 times hopper speed for the whole stack of items will be less than 5 minutes. However, if after this entire thing is done, I dump another chest of lime wool into there, then you start to encounter despawning. So make sure that before you dump a whole bunch of items in there, or maybe if you're going to dump a whole bunch of items in, you can always just walk over to the chest and put them in. You don't have to dump an entire double chest full of 64 stacks of items into here. If you can just walk over here and dump them in here instead, I think that's a lot simpler, and that's the best fix to this problem, is to just be mindful of putting a whole bunch of one type of item into it. And if you really want to run it through this order, don't sort multiple double chests of the same item, because you can possibly encounter despawning issues. With just like normal stacks of items like this, I'm not going to encounter any despawning issues. So for most normal use cases, you'll be completely fine. But that gets us back into this one, which if you have a single 1 times hopper speed into these chests, this overflow becomes a lot more of a problem, because you're not taking these items out 2 times hopper speed, you're taking them out 1 times hopper speed, which is half as fast, obviously. And because of that, I would highly recommend at least having this system in, so it's picking the items out of the world at 2 times hopper speed and putting them into this chest at 2 times hopper speed, but then it's distributing them at 1 times hopper speed. So if you're going to build a chest wall like this, at least have this input system at the top with, I can show a little bit more how that works. If the rail is in the forwards position, make sure that you have this hopper under the rail pointing forwards and then down, and this one's just pointing right. And then if the rail is in the backwards position, have the same thing, but just push backwards a little bit. So let me put that back real quick. And there. So another issue with this type of hopper wall is because you have a multi-item sorter, there can be multiple different types of items sorted into each slice. So as you can see over here, these ones are sorting ores, and I've got them set up to sort the regular ore and the deep slate ore. So if I really wanted to find a deep slate ore, or probably more commonly if you have like a valuables chest where you have your iron and your coal and your gold and stuff like that, and then your diamonds are also sorted into there, and you have a whole bunch of items in the chest and then you sort a couple diamonds, it's possible that this entire chest gets filled with the items that you don't want, and then when the diamonds come in, they'll be stuck in this hopper back here. And then if you sort more items in, they'll start coming up into here, and then you'll go looking for your diamonds, and you can't see them because they're in this hopper in the back. So that's a problem with multi-item sorters, mostly because there's multiple different items in one chest. If this entire thing was just sorting white glass, then all that would ever be back here is more white glass, and you probably wouldn't care if there's a couple stacks of white glass back there because you can just grab all of this white glass if you wanted. But with a multi-item sorter, it's possible that there's an item in the back that you really want to get that gets stuck back there. So that's another reason I wouldn't recommend doing this, because items will get stuck back here, and there's not really, I mean, I guess you can look back there and grab them, but it's kind of inconvenient. Now this hopper wall over here also kind of encounters the exact same problem where items will eventually get backed up into these hoppers back here. This is set up in a way that you can kind of reach in there and grab those hoppers. So if you've got items that are getting stuck in the back, you can at least access the hoppers. It's more of just like an overall flaw with how multi-item sorters work versus regular item sorters. So that's just something to be aware of. I would still recommend building this chest wall over this one, just strictly for the extra speed that it adds and the ability to counteract the item despawning and overflow issue by having it work at full times 2x speed instead of 2x speed, just putting it into a buffer and then dropping it off into the chests. So you can build this. I would still recommend this version. A bit more complicated, but I really like this chest setup. So another thing with the system that you might want to look at is this. These are a new and improved cart eater that doesn't use amethyst blocks. So one thing that I found when I was trying to build this in my own world was I didn't have any of these amethyst clusters. And it took me quite a while to go around and find all these amethyst clusters, and I wanted to figure out a way to do it without amethyst clusters. A common way to do it without amethyst clusters is actually to use heads, but I don't think everybody has access to a lot of these heads. I might be wrong, but last time I checked, these weren't very commonly available in survival, and I think a single stair block is a lot more commonly accessible. So the previous design, these rails went on the mud block, so it would look a little bit like this. These stairs were slabs, and then you had a block like this with an amethyst cluster. So if you want to convert from an amethyst cluster version to a stair version, remove the amethyst cluster, replace the slab with a stair, like that, and then remove one rail so that there is no rail on top of the mud block. And this will work exactly the same as the amethyst cluster version, but it's a lot more survival friendly. So if the amethyst cluster was the only thing holding you back on building this farm, or this storage system, hopefully this will help everybody be able to build the farm. Farm, I keep saying farm, sorting system, I apologize. Oh, one other thing that I want to mention is this. You might notice that I put a button right here in my tutorial and I said that I was going to leave the button here so that I could test the jeez, that's going to be the end of me, so that I could test the sorter, I would like to highly suggest that you do not keep this button here or do not put this button here at all, because this could cause problems with the sorting system. If you activate the sorting system from the button right here, it will break. Make sure that once you have the farm sorting system fully built, you activate it using this button right here on the front, because if you notice, this button will send its input up through here, around here, and down into this observer, which will send a 1-tick pulse into the clock. If you activate a button, it'll send a much longer redstone pulse than 1 tick into the clock, and it will have the consequence of locking this hopper right here with this torch for a lot longer. So eventually this dispenser will run out of items, and then your carts will only have like 3 filter items or 2 filter items or no filter items even. And then it's just going to be grabbing whatever it wants from these chests and running through the sorter and then getting all messed up. So make sure that you do not place a button on this block. I would like to emphasize that. Do not put a button here. Use the button on the front of the sorter. There's just a couple more things that I want to bring up with the design. One thing that a lot of people have been asking about is whether they can swap out these mud blocks for soul sand blocks in order to make this 1.18 friendly, or have it not be reliant on 1.19. And unfortunately, that is not the case, because in 1.18 or lower versions other than 1.19, if you break a hopper minecart, it will just turn into a hopper and a minecart. And that is not good, because it means that we can't recycle hopper minecarts back into these chests in the back. So in 1.19, if you break a hopper minecart, it drops as a hopper minecart. And that is incredibly important to how this sorting system works. So no, you cannot build this in versions lower than 1.19. I know a lot of servers are not going to be running on 1.19 or might not have updated yet. So you're just going to have to find a different design, because this one is reliant on 1.19. Another thing with versions is that this design does not work in the Bedrock edition either. It is only Java edition exclusive, and that's because there's some differences in how Rails work and how Rails interact with water between the two versions. And Rails, even though you can waterlog Rails in the Bedrock edition, the non-waterlogged Rails will get washed away by water. But in Java edition, if you have a rail and then you get some water, it's going to be just fine being around the water. In Bedrock edition, this rail will pop off, and that makes it so that you can't actually get this system to work with the rails going along through the water right here. There's probably other issues with Bedrock Edition. I know there's a whole bunch of differences between Java Edition and Bedrock Edition, but when I tried to build it, this was the first problem that I encountered, and just determined that it wasn't going to work. So I apologize to any Bedrock Edition players who want to build a sorting system, because I know that there's not a lot of options, and it would have been awesome if this worked in Bedrock Edition, but unfortunately that's not the case. One last thing that I want to mention, I promise this is the last thing, I keep saying that, but make sure that you don't unload the sorter while it's running. So while this button is on and there's items in the chest, make sure that you keep this loaded. You can use a portal chunk loader. I've designed the system so that it will fit pretty neatly within a chunk. So I didn't even try to align this, except I did end up building most of this at least within what is this? The east-west direction chunk, but I could have aligned it up better with the center of the chunk here, and then you won't need as many chunk loaders to keep the whole thing active. Alternatively, you can just stay in the sorter until this whole chest is empty and this light turns off. Once the light turns off, there might still be items trickling into the system through the hoppers, but you can safely unload it or log out without breaking anything. you could also build this in the spawn chunks, because the spawn chunks are permanently loaded, and then you could leave and do whatever you want, and the system will never break by being unloaded. Can't promise it won't break other ways, because that's how redstone works in Minecraft, but it won't break by unloading the system. One more thing that I'd like to mention is I want to say thank you for all of the feedback that the first video has gotten. I never thought that it would be as big as it was, and I mean, it's got at this point like 9,000 views, which might not be a lot to a lot of people, but that's insane to me, and it just warms my heart to see the positive response that the video's gotten and people actually building my own creation in their worlds, and it's just so cool. So I want to say thank you for that, and yeah, I hope that people keep on building this thing and that it doesn't have as many problems in the future. I will update the world download in the description of the original video so that it will be this updated version, and I'll also try to keep the world download up to date in case I find any more issues with the system. I think the biggest issue was just this little thing right here. So now that that's fixed, hopefully everything is good, but knowing Redstone, there will probably be more bugs in the future. I will try to keep everything up to date. So yeah, hopefully it all works. Thank you for watching, and I hope everybody has a nice day.